All right, here I'm looking at using the page in a different way, and these were illustrations for Gamma World and fantasy D&D game, and then another D&D inspiration, kind of a Kasurigama with a knuckle duster that had spikes on it, and here's the weight without the chain. And again, not a lot of detail, not a lot of attention played. It was probably going to be like a cone-shaped end, which would not be all that useful. But you know, again, this back in the 80s, I wasn't doing a lot of detail. Here we have a helmet. This is inspired by Conan, and I used this in as an illustration for a D&D game. And these horns are absolutely absurd. They would do nothing but get in the way and cause the person wearing the helmet to get killed. Blade coming in, hit this, and you're just going to snap the guy's neck wearing it. Here we had an interesting thing. This was a solid one-piece design that I was actually inspired by an actual style wrench for a lathe. It was a wrench designed to loosen arbors on the lathe. And this is exactly what it looked like, but it was just a square bar or a rectangular bar. And the tip was a little notch, and you use that to unlock something. But it inspired me to make this. So I know that this was done back in the late 80s, because that's when I used that particular tool. And here we had a design that I actually had in a dream, which is a two-handed sword with a hole in the blade so that you could use it for a peg to hold it in place on your back. Yes, back draw sheaths are absurd, but at the time I really hadn't known that. I hadn't done as much research, and putting a hole in the middle of your blade is dumb. Here we have something called the Water's Edge. It was a magic item for a campaign, and it's better than I could have possibly done it, because the blade at least kind of makes sense in comparing. As a one-handed, it's a little bit thick, the handle's a little bit small. You get these kind of silly outriders, but it was a water-based blue tinted meteorite steel. It was a water-based magic item from some aquatic adventure. I loved aquatic adventures, always had. Then we get into some really kind of a silly, I called it the Life Reaver, and it's just like this over-the-top anime executioner sword with runes on here. It probably says something. I don't remember what it says. But yeah, it's kind of silly and over the top. Then we have another splash page, and these are a little bit darker, so they might be easier to see. We have a fancy poignard, 2 to 5 / 1 to 4. Remember back when weapons had 2 ratings depending on whether you're fighting a medium or large creature? There you go. And we have kind of a dagger here, over the top, two-handed axe. A dagger, an enjato, another dagger, a large two-handed sword inspired by the Guardians of the Flame, the science fiction, fantasy series of books. I think that's what they were called, Guardians of the Flame? Yeah, I think that was. And then we have a small 2-bitted hand axe, which is kind of silly. A hand axe should be a tool. It should not have 2 bits. It should have 1. It should have a hammer on the back. Then we have kind of a knife, a large over-the-top knife. Again, it's kind of a silly battle axe, and a very large over-the-top two-handed axe. My early era was plagued with oversized, chunky weapons, and I apologize for that. And here we have another one, this kind of thing that you'd see like from the executioner be wielding. Here we have a kind of a Russian-style geometric mace, one-handed mace, and that's semi-realistic. Then we have just a dagger, a small hand axe, and a throwing axe, and this one actually makes almost sense. The dimensions are 9 inches by 17 inches, kind of a Franciscan design, and it would actually function. And here we have a science fiction powered crossbow, so essentially a bolt thrower. It had no prod, it would just propel them through the use of, it was magnetic, maybe propulsion from the force field generation, just kind of impeller drive, make it up. Here we had a large 2-bitted battle axe, and here we have a gauntlet weapon, which would pull this and pull the blades back into the handpiece, push them out, and they pop out. So it's used in a slashing motion. And I believe I stole that from a science fiction force fantasy novel. I don't remember what it was. Did it have raccoons in it? Like humanoid raccoons? It might have. Here we have some more science fiction designs, a large over-the-top machine gun style placement, heavy thing with a large battery pack that was external. Here we have a shoulder-mounted bazooka of some variety for designing for doing heavy weapon damage. Oh, bother! Did I? No. Okay, I'm looking at a timer over here to make sure I don't run over, and I'm not sure if I actually did that properly. I think I may have gone too far on that. Yeah, I think I did. So I have to keep an eye on that clock. Alrighty, so here we have another helmet, and this helmet at least is somewhat realistic. It kind of makes sense. It isn't as crazy as some of the other things that I could have possibly have done. There's no silly points on top. It looks like it could be worn and used. It has large eye holes, but it's very, very plain. Here we have one of the most difficult drawings I did in my early era. I had never tried my hand at doing hands like this scale. So these are actually two fists. This is called Razor Fist. It was a blade that actually clicked and disappeared. It appeared and disappeared because this was a stone. It was a magic blade that popped out. Buttons that did magical things. This is all inspired by like the whole idea of the Rod of Lordly Might. But these were large, very large. This whole thing is 4 feet long. It's got another spike down here. So an early concept of double weapons. Before that idea was, really brought forth in like 3rd edition. So one second, let me check something here. Yeah, so yeah, I'm gonna make sure I keep an eye on that timer over there. I did not do that timer well, but you know, live and learn. But yeah, this is cross swords and a big gem, and it was silly and over the top. But the people who I gamed with loved it. They ate it up. Very emblematic of the 80s, I guess. And here we have some more Gamma World illustrations. This was a weapon that would slip over the fingers, so you'd actually slip it over here, and it would cover up these 2 fingers, and you'd use it like that. Just a pistol with an absurdly short stock. A blaster inspired by Star Wars, another blaster inspired by Star Wars with a stock that hopefully would be a little more usable. Here we have a shuttle of some variety, and this was inspired by, I think, a Matchbox car I'd seen years before. Also inspired by Damnation Alley, the movie. So yeah, I had a thing for tank-like weapons and science fiction, so I did my own illustrations, and here you have another of that same vehicle, and then you have like a power sled. So this is like you'd lie on this prone, and this whole thing would be kind of like almost like a powered, using a powered skateboard. You lie in your stomach for doing fast downhill work. This is a very similar concept. And this was an illustration from a Gamma World campaign. This was actually powered by a very strong spring. So you'd pull back on this. It was a very powerful spring. It then launched different tips. We had an explosive tip, a bladed tip, a tip that you could use with a line, a blunt tip, and a grappling hook, and this is a barbed tip. And you would actually dial out how much energy you were imparting in. I'm not sure how it worked. It may have been pneumatic or something, but it was for a Game World campaign. And sometimes those got a little on the silly side. All right, so I've got 2 minutes left. Okay. Yeah, my camera is weird. I can only film for like 10 minutes and 40-something seconds. I've never figured out why. Now, these were derived from the 21st century, when I started to actually experiment once again with drawing. And it was early, so I'm still doing just shading for wood. I'm not doing any textures. This was a bladed gauntlet inspired by 3rd edition. This was a very similar concept. There was a guard with the blade on the outside. And I was experimenting with axes that had different geometric shapes. I kind of liked this one. That one was, yeah, it's okay. And this one was just kind of silly. And then I'm still not owning the page. I'm still doing things that were kind of tentative. Like here we have it was kind of taken from a bush axe. These are my trying to justify a double-ended sword, making the shaft longer, because this makes far more sense than the way that swords were portrayed in 3rd edition, which made absolutely no sense whatsoever. Then we have a double axe, and again, all inspired by 3rd edition. Then we have a shield a buckler that has blades on either side. But this is the standard small shield that we strap to the arm, because real world bucklers are held in the hand. This is kind of like a Conan the Barbarian kind of thing, you know what I mean? Because that's what we're looking at right there. Alrighty, so yeah, I'm going to cut this video here, and then we'll continue with our next installment.